Well, the General Assembly is over. Sine die has begun. And now it's time for campaigning. Campaigning for the constitutional referendum for congressional lines here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Across the country, the president has asked conservative states to redraw their lines mid-cycle to give them more of an advantage. And Virginia and other Democratic states with California are going to counter it. Is this a good thing for the Commonwealth of Virginia? What does it mean for the balance of power in Congress? And where do the voters stand as it relates to the messaging about this issue? It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric LaVille, and you're joining us for our 2026 General Assembly series. Once again, I want to thank you, as you always do, joining us as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. Well, for those of you that have been joining us for the last, really, beginning of the year, from January to now, you know that we've been covering the General Assembly and all the things happening, the inauguration, and it's just so much that has transpired, of course, with the historic election of both the governor, attorney general, and lieutenant governor, and the historic, absolute historic election of the Democrats winning control and power of the General Assembly, and also the historic election of the largest Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. I mean, Virginia is really making history in a lot of great areas in a good way, and it is something that is taking note across the country, especially with our governor being tapped to give the response to the president's State of the Union. I mean, all things Virginia. But as I say, and those of you that listen to me on this show, see me on news outlets, as Virginia goes, so goes the rest of the country. And with that, when we talk about as Virginia goes, as does the rest of the country, one issue which is so important that impacts the entire country as it relates to the balance of power in Congress is the Virginia Constitution Amendment. Now, 4 were passed, but only one is up for vote right now, and that is the constitutional referendum to redraw the lines in Virginia for congressional lines only. According to the Virginia Mercury, early voting is underway across Virginia for an April 21st statewide referendum that could give the General Assembly temporary power to redraw the state's congressional districts ahead of this fall's midterm election. Now, if voters approve, the move would likely reshape the current 6-5 partisan split in Virginia's delegation into a map that favors Democrats in as many as 10 of the state's 11 districts. Now, right now, Democrats hold 6 seats out of 11 congressional seats here in the Commonwealth. Now, keep in mind, we have 13 total in Congress, but every state has 2 U.S. senators. Our 2 U.S. senators are both former governors, and U.S. Senator Mark Warner, who's the senior senator, and junior senator, U.S. Senator Tim Kaine. Every state has 2 U.S. senators. All right, this is a little civics lesson. So on the Senate side, we have 100 seats. Everybody gets 2, whether you're Rhode Island or you're California, whether you're New York, whether you're Missouri, Oklahoma, Nebraska, whoever you are, you only get 2. And we have our 2. On the House side, there are only 435 seats available, but that's apportioned by population. So the Commonwealth of Virginia, given our population, we have 11. Some states have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and some states have in the upwards of 20 plus and so forth. Of course, we know New York, Florida, Ohio, California, states like that. But we have 11. Of that 11, right now, Democrats hold 6 of those seats. And of course, here in the city of Norfolk and where Norfolk State sits, Congressman Bobby Scott is our U.S. Congressman, who is also what we call the Dean of the delegation, which means he is the longest serving member of Congress currently right now in Virginia, in the House. Now, with that being the case, right now, the president has asked conservative states such as Texas, Indiana, Missouri, Florida, to redraw their lines to give him more Republican seats for control in Congress, with the midterm election being this year. Now, this is 2026. That means that we will elect a new members of the House of Representatives and 1/3 of the Senate in November. But the president, along with a lot of conservative members and a lot of talking heads, and including myself, believe that he believes that his agenda in his White House is in trouble, given the very aggressive nature of policies coming out of the White House. Therefore, he wants more seats. In other words, he's like, hey, I know we redraw lines every 10 years after the U.S. Census, but I'm asking to redraw it this time, mid-cycle. In other words, this is the president who's been operating the way that he usually operates, not by the rules that are given, but by the rules that he wants. And that's one thing about this administration. They have secure power, and they're using it, every bit of it, every ounce of it, to their advantage. So as the adage goes, when you have power, use it, because you never know when you'll have it again. But at the end of the day, we got to use it for what's right, because we're a nation made up of many people, not just one faction, one political group, or just one family, but it is for the entire nation. So back to what's happening now is that right now, Texas, Missouri, Florida, they have redrawn their lines, and they've actually canceled a couple of Congressional Black Caucus seats. We have one in Missouri and also in Texas, where those seats are basically eliminated and they can't win. So the Congressional Black Caucus is going to lose numbers because of this as well. However, what's happening is Democratic states, California, Virginia, and others are saying, hey, we've got to bring a balance to power, right? If the president's going to do this with conservative seats, we have to do it with Democratic seats in order to check the powers of the White House, because the Republican Congress is not, and be able to bring balance back. That's what this is about. The other part of it is this referendum is very narrow. It only addresses congressional seats in the House, and it's only until 2030, when everybody in the country redraws their lines once again. So, according to Virginia Mercury, Democrats say it's a necessary move to counter gerrymandering to favor Republicans in other states, once again at the behest of President Donald Trump. Now, there's another side to this, the flip side of the coin. What are Republicans saying? Republicans, according to Virginia Mercury, frame it as a partisan power grab that will undo the work of Virginia's bipartisan redistricting commission and the Supreme Court of Virginia, which created the current map in 2021. So that's true. Once again, the Virginia voters voted for the commission that actually draws the lines to take partisan politics out of it, right? And the Supreme Court actually is the last say over it, the state Supreme Court. It works. And what the General Assembly is saying, we're not taking this power away, but what we're simply doing is just simply changing these lines now based upon what's happening in the country. So that's where we are, and early voting has started. All right, it started last week. We got 45 days up until the day of election of April 21st. So with Sine Die being Saturday, that means legislators are back on the ground starting today to advocate for this or advocate against it. Because, again, we're a democracy. We got both sides. You can vote for it or vote against it. There are members who are actively out there, and they are getting this message out. But voters right now are confused. We're finding that voters are not really understanding why this is necessary. When they look at it, they think it's on its face it's a bad thing because of gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is a bad word when it comes to voting rights, especially for African Americans. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because I've got someone here who's a good friend and one of the best journalists I've known. Currently, Virginia Mercury, but he's worked for Virginia Pilot and other publications throughout his career. I have none other than longtime journalist and author, my good friend, Roger Chesley. Roger, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing fine, Eric. How are you doing? It's so kind. I'm thinking you probably don't know a lot of journalists. I'm one of the best journalists you know, but that's very kind of you. That's very kind of you to say. And I'm also on a Norfolk State station that you would welcome a Howard University Bison alum. I appreciate you for doing that as well, Eric.
Well, Roger, we've known each other for a very long time since I've arrived here in the Commonwealth. So we're over 15 years, headed toward 2 decades. Can you believe it?
No, I don't. I refuse to believe that I'm that old, but I know that I am. And thank you for having me to talk about this a very serious issue that's going on here in Virginia.
Absolutely. Roger, you just published an article, commentary actually, in the Virginia Mercury regarding the mismessaging of this particular issue. It is something where we've got political mailers going out. It's confusing individuals. It's got pictures of the march on Selma, in the Selma across the bridge. And, you know, a lot of African Americans see that as a classical civil rights moment and a moment that really changed the time for African Americans across the country, even here in Norfolk and Hampton Roads. But the message behind it is a little bit, I'll say misleading. Others say...
Oh, very, very misleading. It's bogus. And the people... You know, when you don't know much about the people that are putting out a particular mailer or a particular piece of literature, where it's confusing or they're relatively new or the name seems somewhat amorphous, that tells you something right from the start. That, you know, the motives of the people putting out the messaging might not always be the truest or the most honest. And what they've tried to do on this is suggest that a vote for the referendum is a vote against civil rights, is a vote that diminishes the legacy of black people who, and some whites, who fought for civil and voting equality in this country. Nothing could be further from the truth, trying to bring up that legacy and apply it to this particular referendum. It's shameful. It shouldn't have been used. And it's the fact that former Delegate A.C. Cardoza is the front man on this effort, even though we don't really know about the financing so far on it, tells you a lot about how he was kind of thrust into this role, I assume willingly, because they were trying to take some of the criticisms about race out of it. Now, the folks who are mainly behind it, which I assume are Republicans, and a party that's overwhelmingly white in this country and in this state, if they had somebody like that in the forefront, it would have garnered all sorts of criticism because of that. So they tried to take some of the sting out of that by putting the only person who was a black Republican in last year's, in the most recent terms, General Assembly as the front person on this. But there are currently no African Americans in the legislative Black Caucus in Virginia, even though there are 37 Democrats. There are no Black Republicans, and there are 37 Democrats in the legislative caucus. And I did a quick check with some of the reporters at the Mercury to say, did Cardoza do anything in terms of the legislation that he sponsored in his tenure in the House of Delegates that advanced the concerns and interests of African Americans or other people of color? And the quick response was, no, that was not his role. So it's all of that brings some curiosity to, you know, why he's out front on this. Yeah. The bottom line for me, and I'll let you get back running your show.
No, you're good. You're good. This is all great information.
The bottom line for me is this is a reaction to what Democrats in the House and Senate and the governor's mansion are doing and why they're doing this. It's a reaction to what President Trump did in urging states that had Republican-led legislatures and governors to redo their districts in the middle of the decade. It is highly unusual. It has happened before, but it's usually specific cases or very narrow. And you don't have to do this if the agenda that's coming out of the White House and his administration is favorable to many Americans. I mean, he's done some things in the year plus that he's been back in office that have harmed Americans. And one of his promises was that he would not get into foreign conflicts, and he's broken that as well. So this is why he's done it. And Virginia Democrats are saying, basically, that was dirty pool. And this is the only way that we can help fight back something that should have been a state prerogative that the president is now trying to control.
Well, one thing we do on this show is that we talk about issues and make sure that our listeners have the information that they need to make a more well-informed decision. And of course, we all know we're dealing with a president that says one thing, does another, and usually he's the first one to know about it. But for those that are listening, it's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Lavelle, and you're joining us for our 2026 General Assembly series. Sine Die happened on yesterday, and today starts the active campaigning across the board as early voting has begun for the constitutional referendum in order to determine if the Commonwealth of Virginia will become active in bringing balance back to the House of Congress. Right now, the president has asked conservative states, including Texas, Missouri, and Florida, to redraw their congressional lines to give them more Republican seats in the midterm election coming up in November. The Commonwealth of Virginia, along with California and other Democratic states, have said that they're acting in order to redraw their lines to bring balance back to Congress. On April 21st, the Commonwealth of Virginia voters will be able to decide and will have the final results when polls close to determine if a new map approved by the General Assembly will be provided for voters to vote in the November election. The current representation in Congress is 6-5. Currently, there are 6 Democratic members and 5 Republican members representing the House of Congress in the House of Representatives. Now, with this new map, it would give Democrats 10 leaning districts and Republicans only 1. In Hampton Roads, of course, Congressional District 1 and 2 are the major districts that we will see impacting voters in this area. Joining us is my good friend, longtime journalist in this area and author, Roger Chesley from the Virginia Mercury. He's written an article about the mismessaging that we're seeing over this issue. Republicans now are campaigning, saying that this is, especially the black voters, this is taking away their rights. Roger, you mentioned earlier A.C. Cardoza, former delegate, House of Delegate member here out of Hampton area, going toward Poquoson and Gloucester. And he is now head of a PAC, a political action committee, in which individuals are now fighting to provide information, quote unquote, to black voters about their position with this. According to one of your colleagues in the Virginia Mercury, Marcus Schmidt, he wrote an article saying that A.C. Cardoza says campaign warned minority voters about redistricting changes. Now, Senator Mamie Locke blasts the tactic as being stupid. In this particular article, he states that Cardoza, the political storm over Miller campaign invokes civil rights era imagery in Virginia's redistricting referendum. Now, the fight intensified last week, Tuesday. I believe you and I spoke during that time, as black conservatives stepped forward to defend the message and oppose the proposed map changes, adding new context to the debate over the mailers that has centered on race and historical symbolism. Now, I also want to note that Cardoza revealed Tuesday that he serves as chairman of 2 political action committees, Democracy and Justice PAC and Justice for Democracy, which is tied to the mailer criticizing the April 21st referendum. Speaking at a news conference Tuesday of last week at the state capitol, where he defended the strategy and dismissed outrage from Democratic officials and civil rights groups. And this is from him. He says, quote, "I know there is some controversy behind the campaign. My statement is very simple. The people who have controversy with this mailer are the same people talking about fairness while constructing a map that disenfranchises black voters in favor of Northern Virginia legislators. It's a shame," unquote. Roger,
Can I jump in here?
Listen, I'm giving the ball right to you.
Yeah. So first of all, the former delegate doesn't care about black voters losing any clout in Northern Virginia. Yes, we have certain pockets of the state where the population is fairly large, and we know that it's the urban crescent, it's Northern Virginia, the Richmond area, and Hampton Roads. That's not what his concern is, and he knows it. What his concern is, being a Republican and being the mouthpiece on this particular issue, is that Republicans could lose seats here in Virginia if this map goes forward. Secondly, it is a heinous imagery that they use to suggest that the fight for voting rights in this country and in this state really is somehow that what's going on now harkens to that particular time period. Not in the least. It's shameful that they tried to dredge that up in saying that that's what this fight is all about. This fight is pure bare knuckle politics between Democrats and Republicans. And, Democrats didn't throw the first stone on this. Republicans did in trying to rig the elections in different states for the U.S. House of Representatives. He doth protest too much when he suggests this. And the fact really, when the initial news stories came out about the mailers, my wife had showed me photos of the mailers over the weekend from some of her friends. That got me, to start thinking about, maybe this should be the next issue that I should write about. When Cardozo was initially questioned about this by the Virginian pilot, he said he thought he was treasurer of the two PACs. So is he really in charge of this particular effort, or is he just a mouthpiece because there's very little information about those two political action committees that are really out there. There are some statements suggesting that the first finances of this of the two PACs didn't really come on board except within the past few days. So, they're trying to muddy the waters, and they're also trying to A, try to drive blacks to vote against this, or B, try to get black people not to go to the polls about this. This is a special election. This is not going to be, other things on the ballot per se. So if they can, drive down turnout enough, that would be one of the goals behind the Republican effort for this to fail. And keep in mind, this is all being done trying to extract every last Republican victory in the House of Representatives in the fall, because they know that some of their policies are very unpopular with the general public.
Absolutely. And Roger, one of the things that this particular mailer shows, what it shows is that Democratic civil rights leaders, they actually, they were just offended. They condemned the materials, saying it's a misuse of the imagery because, it shows a black and white imagery, civil rights marching, again, on Selma Bridge, in Selma, Alabama, and marching across it. And Roger, this is something that we as African Americans know very well. It was an image that really changed, how we see voting and so forth. So with that, it's a major, major blow. I believe a lot of people believe to what we believe is to be something that is sacred,
Very, very much so. The beatings that people took on Bloody Sunday in 1965, that helped earn the passage of the Voting Rights Act. The late John Lewis was one of those persons that was beaten on that bridge that day and attacked where they were peaceful marchers. And so, yes, that means a lot to African Americans, especially African Americans of a certain age. But let me just add this, too. It wasn't that long ago in Virginia that the seats were 8 for Republicans and 3 for Democrats. Bobby Scott was one of the few at that time Democrats representing the state. Now, that was the case even though the split between Democrats and Republicans in elections were often pretty close to 50-50 on a lot of the presidential elections. So it's nothing new for one party to try to tilt the playing field to, its own side. What's different now is that the mid-decade redistricting that's taken place in other states, what's happening in Virginia is a reaction to what the president has tried to manipulate in so many states across the country.
Absolutely. And also, when you spoke with others, of course, number one, we take a look at Attorney General Jay Jones, also the NAACP, Virginia State Conference, and the state of congressional politicians representing Virginia. I mean, the backlash was immediate. As a matter of fact, Jay Jones, the first black attorney general in the Commonwealth of Virginia, he said, quote, "My parents and grandparents lived through the reality of Jim Crow in Virginia." He said they experienced firsthand what it meant to when the law and the political system were used to silence black voices. That history is not a political prop, and it should never be exploited in a misleading attempt to confuse voters. So that's from the first African-American attorney general. We know his father being Jay Jones, of course, passed away, but Judge Jay Jones, and a history and a legacy in civil rights in this area. Not only that, but you also interviewed in your article by my colleague, Jesse Richmond, associate professor, political science at Old Dominion University. And also our prayers go out to ODU.
Yes, that's terrible what happened.
Absolutely.
Friday.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Thursday.
Yeah, that's right. So, again, our prayers go out to them over there. But he said, I think the redistricting referendum involves gerrymandering Virginia's congressional districts to make them considerably less fair in order to achieve partisan objectives to try to counter partisan gerrymanders elsewhere in the country. So, yes, he's saying it is being redrawn, but it is, like you said, to counterbalance partisan gerrymanders elsewhere in the country. So,
and I think you have to take a look at, for people who think this is, there is obviously a portion of the electorate who would say, well, wait a minute, two wrongs don't make a right. It is not fair just because other states are acting this way. We don't need to do that. We don't need to devolve or lower ourselves to other standards. Unfortunately, that's a bit of high-mindedness that one party doesn't seem to care about anymore, and they're more than willing to twist things to just obliterate customs to get what they want. So the question is, will Virginia take part? Virginia, which has a majority of both chambers that are Democrats, and has a governor that's a Democrat, are they going to sit on the sidelines or are they not? And I just go back again to the president. He tends to corrupt a lot of things that he touches. He got himself involved in something that should have been purely a state issue, but he's doing this because he's trying to wring out every seat that he can, right. Because of his policies that messed up Medicaid, hurt food stamps, and also has given tax breaks to the wealthiest of Americans and are making a lot of middle and lower income Americans fight for federal aid. So that's what we're dealing with.
Well, Roger, this issue is hot. It is the hottest issue we currently have. So we may have you back if you'll join me, my good friend, to talk about and educate.
Are you going to double my salary for the next time, Eric? That's all I ask.
Absolutely. You got it. Extra popcorn for this guy. But once again, Roger, thank you so much. Check out his article, Virginia Mercury, where he has written about this, his commentary. People behind cynical referendum mailer deserve ongoing harsh blowback. Once again, thank you so much for your insight. We're going to continue to have this issue. We're going to talk about it frequently because the early voting has started. You can vote now for the referendum. Take a look at what the issues. Make your informed decision. Voting ends April 21st, and we will determine whether the Commonwealth of Virginia will be the state to bring balance back to the country and counter the White House and their actions. As Virginia goes, so goes the rest of the country. We want to thank you, as always, for joining us, as you always do on this Sunday morning. Until next time, be good, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.